it doing it? I think it's doing it.
It's doing it.
Yeah. Okay. I also have a YouTube video, multiple YouTube videos up of this. I have one that I had done for one of my screenwriting classes last semester. I have one that someone else did, and I can post more. So there's a lot of resources, but I had a lot of different really good screenwriters had kind of hounded this into me. It took me a really hard time to really grasp it. And I didn't completely grasp it until I was teaching screenwriting last year. And also now that we're working on the show, and I was hired to write a script in the spring. And so I had to really break down want and need. And I have found this to be a lifesaver. And when I was teaching art of storytelling with Jesse, going through their stories and having everyone do this breakdown, helps so much. So I'm going to go through it with you. So I created this sheet. And I think there's 4 questions that you have to ask when you're creating a character and when you are evaluating a character. And not the week when you're doing the character sketch, but the week that we're not meeting. So next week, this is what you'll be doing with the Rear Window protagonist and Thelma and Louise protagonist. So you ask, what does my character want? Now, you're probably used to hearing of general want and need, and it's confusing because the want is usually in 2 parts. There's the tangible, like the physical want that we can see, and then there's the intangible want. So a tangible or a physical want is something that is visible in the screenplay. Imagine it's something that you can really visualize. It's a very tangible goal. It could be a goal such as go to college. You can picture the character going to college. If you can see it, it's probably a physical goal. The character's like, I want to go to college. That's their physical goal. It can be a person or an object. My goal is to date this guy. My goal is to date this girl. My goal is to be like, I don't know, queen, prom queen, something like that, something that we can see. And it's usually where the larger want of the character is placed. So the larger want is the intangible want. So that, again, the tangible want is something like, I want to, okay, let me go back to the intangible one. So the one that we can't see is like, I want to be popular. That could be a goal. That is a goal that I cannot see unless it is visually expressed. I want to be popular. Therefore, my goal, my physical goal, is to be a cheerleader or a like prom queen. So all that to say, there's 2 types of wants. There's the bigger want, like I want to be popular. And then there's the want that we can see, which the movie is usually centered around. If you think about Mean Girls, she wants to fit in. She wants to be like maybe like one of the plastics. She wants to be popular. It's all rooted in her insecurity and wanting to be liked and popular. And that is usually in conflict with number 3, which is the need. I'm gonna slow down just for a second so you can process. So again, a character wants something. There's usually 2 forms: popularity, how does it express physically, and it's always in contrast with what the character needs instead. So again, the want and the need are always in conflict. If a character, say their intangible, their want is, I want to be accepted, then their need will be, okay, you need to be okay with not being accepted by other people, and you need to accept yourself. So yeah, I'm trying to think of another one. I'm going to use Mean Girls again. It's like, she wants to be popular. Her need is to accept the fact, and she wants to be cool. Her need is to accept her own differences and accept who she is. Accepting who you are is the most popular need and most common need in every film and story. If your character, to tell if your story is working, you say, this is what my character is wanting. What do they need instead? And if they're not complete opposites, then you probably have to readjust your story. Because the reason that you have a need that's in conflict with their want and their goal is because you need to get the character through a story arc. Okay, so I skipped number 2 for a reason, because want and need are the 2 things that are always in contrast. I always think positive and negative. The need is what they really need. The want is what they really don't need, but the character doesn't know what they need all the time. And I'm gonna keep throwing a bunch of information at you. We're gonna be doing this all semester. But if a character does not get what they need, but instead gets what they want, then it's a very sad ending because they never got what they needed. They never got it, but they did get what they want, but that's not really what they needed. And therefore that's a tragic ending. You see this with a lot of Shakespeare tragedies. You have these.
I was gonna say Into the Woods as well.
Mhm.
Like they literally get what they wished for. And whoopsie.
Can you give the quick story for those who don't know it? I've seen it, but
It's a bunch of fairy tales kind of combined into one thing. Like there's Jack and the Beanstalk, there's like
Cinderella.
like they gotta sell the cow to help with the house. There's Cinderella, there's Rapunzel, there's the baker and the baker's wife, and they're trying to get a baby, and then just everything happens. Like, and it's mixed together pretty well.
Mhm. I'm trying to think of another. What was Shakespeare, for instance, with the tragedies? What often makes them tragic is like a character is trying to get revenge, and they want revenge so badly that they end up killing everyone, but they end up dying at the end. And you're like, oh, they should have learned how to forgive and to move on, but they couldn't. So they never got their need. The thing about the need is that we as the audience know it from the beginning. We're like, no, 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 don't do that. Don't do that. You need to do this instead. It's a very human character. So if a character gets their need, but not their want, it's usually a happy ending. It can be a happy ending. This is kind of structural. I'm just gonna say it. We didn't, but it can be a happy ending if a character does get their need and their want. But in order for it to be happy, a character always has to turn down their want at some point. It can't be like, oh, I never had the ability to get what I want. I still want it. I just can't. It has to be, no, I could have this, but I choose my need instead. And that's the only way to have a happy ending. The character has to be able to give up that want and get their need. So when we say get their need, it's not something like, oh, my hands are tied, I'm just going to have to change. It's like literally like you have to want to change. So it's really putting your character through a bunch of like therapy for this writing. Okay, so you go through and you say, what does my character want? You do the intangible and the tangible. You do why does my character want it? This sometimes is what I have found people, including myself, a lot of times lack when we're coming up with a story, because formulaically we say, well, they want this and they need this instead. Okay, I got my character, but it's still not fleshed out enough. So you kind of always have to ask why about everything. And you've probably already seen this in workshops where you're constantly reading each other's stuff and you're like, that's cool. Why do they do that? And it's always the worst answer when you're like, well, I don't know. It just felt right. Sometimes that is what the answer is because you can't articulate why yet. But you always kind of have to know deep down, why is it that they feel like they need to be popular? Why is it that they feel like they need to be prom queen? Why is it that Nemo feels like he has to be his own person without his dad telling him what to do all the time? Like, how did we get there? And that's where a lot of your scenes come in. That's a lot of where your stories come in. And that's also where you find out if this is this kind of character you're really wanting to create. So if you fill us out, what do they want? Why do they want it? What do they need instead? And then you have to know before you go into your story, usually, I have done many stories where I have not figured this out beforehand and I never have finished these stories. So it's good to know, at least when you start, whether or not you want them to get their need at the end. And again, if this character, I put he, but it's like he, be, they, he, she, they, whatever. If this character does get their need, then the ending is happy. If they don't, then it's sad. And just really, really quickly, because I know that y'all are following along for a lot, so I can spill all this out you because I know you're advanced students. For a to make an effective ending where they don't get their want, the character has to have multiple scenes of them having an opportunity to get their need, but they reject it. So the reason being that everything the character does has to be a choice. So a character has to choose to get their need. A character has to choose to not get their need and get their want. Whatever they do, we need to make sure that they have agency. That doesn't mean that they know what they need all the time. It doesn't mean that they know that they're making the wrong decision. In their mind, they're going to justify it probably, but we have to have scenes where they have opportunities to change and they don't. If your character gets their need by like the midpoint or the beginning of the story, then you have no story after that. So your character has to get their need at the end or finally reject their need at the end, because again, it's all about the arc. And once they get their need, the story is over. That's why with TV shows, they always keep adding new obstacles. They keep making sure that the story is not resolved, where the characters don't always get everything they need, that they still have some type of want. Because if you finally gave them what they needed and they're content with that and they don't want anything anymore, then your story is over and then no one wants to watch it. So the conflict comes out of those negatively and positively charged elements all the time. And one of the reasons that we're doing the character sketches that we're doing, like of ourselves and of each other, is to start breaking down like, okay, what do I want? What do these other people tend to demonstrate? What do we kind of need instead? And it gets really awkward sometimes, but realizing that this is just basically human nature. So when we do this sheet, this is the week I'm not going to be there. We're all probably going to have a little bit different wants and needs for each character protagonist. Again, don't do it for all the characters, just do it for who you consider the main character in each film. With Thelma and Louise, you might have just Thelma and Louise, you might do two. With Rear Window, it's probably going to be well, you'll find you've seen Rear Window, right? Or do I see a nod from somebody? Who has seen Rear Window?
I have.
Alyssa has. Anyone else? Oh, I would recommend watching Rear Window then. It's Hitchcock. Watch it, read it first, and you'll just see. You'll just have a guess, like, how does the character need to change, and what is driving them? What is their intangible goal? What is the goal they really want? And a lot of it, again, we may have a little bit different answers, but it's mainly just getting you used to thinking that way. Does anyone have any questions or comment yet? I see there's like the chat is blown up. Charlemagne, I'm gonna read the chat real quick.
It's me who's always in the chat. So, I mean, I guess one question I had, I was wondering if you could talk more about, sorry, I have something on the background. ADHD, but about TV shows and how, because that's right, the character never gets what they need until, the series finale. What are they doing to resolve the episode? Like, how are they getting away with that?
Okay, so this is something that I have been also having to do a lot of analysis on, because like I said last week, one of the things I'm working on now is like a shows. We're working on the pilot, also the series. So in that case, there's usually like 3 different ones. So there's the overall, the intangible, like basically the entire character want, the intangible goal, like the character in general, this character really wants to be popular, or like Better Call Saul. I think it's like Saul, you can see that with Saul from what I recall. Oh, that rhymed. He kind of wants to be liked, he wants to be popular. He needs to probably be okay with being genuine and honest, but he's not. So you kind of have those 10 character traits. And then episode by episode, you give each pilot or each episode a very specific goal. So I'm going to give you an example in the one that I'm working on now. You'll also see I have had filled out a character sheet like this in one of my examples that I post on Blackboard. So the show I'm working on, and I'm working on with like some people that you know as well. We're doing a pilot, but we did a whole Bible for the show that we're working on. And we had a character breakdown. I'll show you. I'll pull it up. It's in Blackboard. Wrong Blackboard. I I'm gonna tell you now, I hate Blackboard. I hate it so much. It's my worst thing ever.
I hate Blackboard so much too. You're not alone. Last time I used it was like in 2012.
Oh man, and that's what I feel like it should have ended in 2012. Like, okay, exactly.
Because at Baylor, they used this thing called Canvas, and Canvas was a whole lot easier to use, in my opinion.
I feel like, oh dear, did I not? Hold on, I'll delete it from my downloads. Canvas is, from what I remember, because I think I've used it once, was a lot easier. Okay, so this is the one that I was filling out. We were doing this in the writer's room, and we have this character named Abel, and generally the whole show is kind of about this guy who is dealing with trauma through his dreams. And so he's like older, his mom died, his mom had like, was kind of mentally kind of like sort of abusive and fixated and of different things and whatever. And she ends up, when he's much older, kind of like killing herself, which is kind of unusual for an older person to hear about different shows. But anyway, this brings back all this trauma that he's ignored his entire life. And he kind of always coped with trauma by like escapism and dreaming. And he would always dream about this TV show that took place inside of his dream. And he'd follow these different characters in there. And a lot of the show is about how his dreams are actually turning into different moments in his life where he has to face his trauma and learn kind of how to accept reality. So what we had to do is we had, let's see. So it was the dreamer's name is Abel. His tangible want in the series is to get rid of the house that his mom died in. Which again, there's so many obstacles because there's a lot of financial things that come up each episode. There's a lot of, the first episode problem is the individual problem, and the individual want for the very first episode is his mom dies and he's trying to find the will. And he doesn't know where the will is. So we have a goal for that one episode. And then for the series, we have his whole goal of, I want to get rid of the house. But the very first problem and goal that he has is he can't find the will. So each episode, there's another problem. So we do it episode by episode. His intangible want is to kind of escape his reality. He wants to escape his trauma. He wants to sell the house. He wants to get rid of everything he owns so that he doesn't have to cope with it. And instead, he'd rather be in the dream world. He'd rather write. His need is to live in reality and to realize that he has to not embrace the past, but like cope with the trauma and be okay with who he is now, and to realize there is no perfect world and you just have to like live in the one that you're given, but do it better. And then at the end of the show, we're like, he will get his need. But using this example of the very first episode, like we have the entire want for the show of he wants to move, he wants to get out of this house that his mom left him. But then again, episode by episode, it's a different goal or obstacle or want, which is the very first episode, I need to find the will. Second episode is can't find the will. Then you have to find out if there's other relatives, but he's estranged from the rest of his family. So then each episode has its own problem, but they still are like little pieces to the bigger problem. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. I have another question. And this is the one that I actually put in the comment section. I was wondering if you could give examples about the types of opportunities we give to characters and they reject. So those opportunities that reveal character and sort of give the audience an idea of what the character needs. I don't know. I'll let you talk.
Okay, I think the first thing that comes to mind is Whiplash. Have y'all seen Whiplash? One person has seen Whiplash. Okay, watch it, read it. It's really good script.
Yeah.
Everyone knows of Whiplash. Yeah. It's kind of about a toxic relationship this really, really talented drummer student has with his like band instructor, basically. I know I'm kind of butchering the plot, basically, but he's a drummer and he wants to be the very best he can be. But to do that, he keeps compromising his values almost and hurting himself just to please his band instructor, who, if he could please him, would kind of be like, would get him career-wise at the very top. As the audience, we know that this kind of relationship and this type of mindset is unhealthy. And we keep thinking, no, don't do that. The band instructor is lying to you. The band instructor is manipulative. The band instructor is toxic. You need to not take these different opportunities. But every time we have like the boy's parents saying, you need to sleep, you need to take a break. And those are the opportunities for him to take his need. He's like, I need to take care of myself. I need to be my own person. Usually you will show the need by like a friend or an ally being like, here, let me help you with this. And they will point out what's wrong with the want. They'll be like, this is not healthy. Don't do this. Again, Mean Girls is one of the best examples. You have that alternative friend group who's like, you're not being yourself. Come do this with us. Come to this party with us. And then she rejects it. She's like, no, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be one of the plastics. Or with Whiplash, she's like, no, I'm focused on my career. I'm going to do anything to get to the top of like this concert or band or whatever he's searching for. So you basically have those little obstacles of people coming in and saying, look, I'll help you. I'll help you. No, it's okay. And then they don't accept it. I think also with like, I keep thinking of Shakespeare tragedies. There's always instances where there's a good character trying to steer the main character away from what they're doing and giving them opportunities, and they say no. Is that a clear example? Does it help any?
It helps me. And I love when you make Shakespeare references because it helps me. I like stealing from Shakespeare. And when you do that, it illuminates it a little bit more so I can steal better.
Yeah, you know what? Oh, I can give a specific Shakespeare example too. The King Lear being one of the most recent ones I've reread. And you know how is everyone kind of familiar with King Lear? Yeah, okay, good. So just knowing that King Lear is a king that's maybe going crazy. And at the very beginning of the play, basically, he says, I've been a great king. I'm going to retire and I'm going to divide up my kingdom between my 3 daughters. Now, however I divide it up is dependent on which daughter can best express how much she loves me. And everyone around King Lear says, like, no, don't do that. You're going crazy. You can't do that because they're going to flatter you. And King Lear says, I'm going to do what I want to do. We already see his flaw. He's very prideful. His want is probably to be, now his want is kind of interesting in King Lear because I have to think through the whole thing. His actual want, I think he kind of like, I think he's kind of lazy in a way. Like he kind of wants to retire and give up, but his need is to be more active and proactive and even active in his daughter's lives. And he doesn't ever do that until the end. But he has a flaw of being very prideful. And so he ends up, everyone around him is like, don't do this, Lear, don't do this, Lear. The daughter who loves him most is the one who is the least articulate. And because of that, he kind of banishes her and doesn't give her hardly any of the kingdom. And the other daughters who actually hate him are better with words and they take over the entire kingdom. And so throughout the play, we see things like that where King Lear gets taken advantage of because he's prideful. And we know what he needs to do is actually kind of be humble in a way and be more proactive. But people keep addressing him and coming up to him and saying, no, don't do this, no, don't do that. And he doesn't listen until the end. And at the end, there's 3 dead daughters at his feet. And he's like, oh, whoops. I should have listened. But he didn't take those chances. So I plot wise, I know that there's better examples with King Lear, but that's even just the first example. You do it kind of scene by scene wise. You have different people come in and be the voice of reason. You can have a different character do that. Sometimes the characters that you write will be watching someone on the street and they will see like a shadow of something that's happening in their life. Like if they're having domestic issues at their house, say, and there's a couple arguing, maybe he'll watch like a couple argue and then forgive each other on the street, just someone that they see in passing. And we in the audience know, oh, okay, he's tying it back to his own relationships and he needs to change and be like this. But then we see when he goes back home and he keeps arguing with his wife that he's refusing to take that change. So there's different ways of doing it. Okay, any more questions on this before we go to y'all stuff? I suppose not. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and I can upload that to my YouTube channel, I guess. I can have it unlisted, and so if y'all don't want to have your faces in there, and I can post it for you. Let me do stop. Wait, how do I stop the recording though?